Welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight for our first ever LD Town Hall, Together We Stand. I'm Lindsay Jones, the President and CEO of the National Center for Learning Disabilities, and I'm excited to open a conversation that truly feels like it's been decades in the making. Before we begin, I want to thank our fabulous partners on tonight's event, Eye to Eye, and all of the incredible LD community members who submitted their vision statements for the future of LD. This event represents the thinking of so many incredible advocates and community members, all who identify with our LD movement. Together We Stand is a town hall that we hope kicks off a much longer conversation. Tonight, you'll hear directly from a number of advocates and allies about their vision for the future. And we know there are hundreds, thousands, millions more whose voices we want to reach and lift up over the next year as we bring this vision into reality. This town hall is a conversation starter, a way for us as a community and a movement to come together and envision the future of LD. This isn't my vision for the future, or Marcus's, or Dave's, or any single person or organization's vision. What we're hoping to do tonight is co-create a future with you and with all of our community. The event came together after a lot of soul searching and deep thinking about this past year and a half. We as a society, as a nation, as a community have faced hard times. COVID-19 impacted us in so many ways. Our world is in flux, and we're grappling with the consequences of a global pandemic, the dual crises of systemic racism and ableism, and a national discussion about the future of school and learning. We've seen students stop attending schools for long periods of time, lost in the chaos of a shift to virtual learning. We've seen parents, students, and teachers pushed to their limits. And we've seen historic traumas inflicted on our community. But despite all of it, we've survived and we're stronger. To give you one example of what our community endured over the past year and a half, I want to show a video. In March of 2020, Congress passed the CARES Act. This bill was the first federal response to the COVID crisis, and it's largely been seen as a success in preventing even deeper catastrophic impacts from the pandemic. But the CARES Act also opened the door for discussions between Congress and the Secretary of Education about whether the pandemic meant it was too difficult to educate students with disabilities, and whether we should hit the pause button on their civil rights until the crisis passed. Can you imagine today, more than a year later, what things would be like if we had allowed that to happen? NCLD and our partners sprang into action to stop this pause on civil rights and created this campaign. Take a watch.
The National Center for Learning Disabilities is a nonprofit advocacy organization focused on serving and making this world better for the 1 in 5 individuals with learning and attention issues.
I have a nonverbal learning disability and am proud to represent the 1 in 5 with learning and attention issues.
The CARES Act directs the Secretary of Education to provide Congress with a list of waivers that could potentially free local educational agencies from their legal obligations. If these waivers are approved, it will effectively open the door to dangerous and damaging changes to the most important federal protections for students with disabilities.
Without the IDEA, I would not have gotten the help, support, or the accommodations that I needed to succeed in school.
Oftentimes it'd be very difficult for me because I was embarrassed, but with the support that IDEA gave me and the support of having those accommodations and seeing the success I had once I did get the accommodations did help me to advocate and speak up for myself and say, I need these accommodations.
Understanding our rights through IDEA has opened the doors for our child to flourish when it comes to accommodations, IEP goals, and programs tailored individually to his needs.
My daughter has dyslexia, ADHD, and anxiety. My idea matters to our family because it means she'll have a fair shot at the resources needed for her to have an academic success.
The rights provided by IDEA are civil rights. And during a pandemic, we can't stand for our policymakers to waive any of those rights. We must work with schools to be flexible and responsive, to help support our schools and get them the funding they need to make sure that we all move forward together.
As you can see from the video, our community came together, urged our nation's leaders to keep educating all students. And while we won that battle, we've been on the defensive for too long. We've had to fight to protect basic rights for students and families. And while we'll continue to do that, what we should be focused on is expanding opportunities and building an inclusive, intersectional, and just society for people who learn differently. This event is our attempt to think about how to get there, to think about that future, to envision a future where we recognize the strengths of people with learning disabilities and attention issues, a future that is inclusive, forward-thinking, and centered on racial and disability justice. Tonight, you'll hear from members of our community who've submitted videos and written responses to the prompt, if we stand together, what does the future of the LD movement look like? From the 60+ responses we received, we organized the evening into 3 major themes. First, the future of school. Next, dismantling ableism and stigma. And finally, building a just and vibrant community. Again, tonight is just the beginning. We invite you to envision the future with us. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to the NCLD and Eye2Eye teams for their work in making this event a reality. We have some incredible speakers. I know you'll leave inspired and ready to get to work. Engage with us in the chat box. Engage with us on social media. Use the hashtag LD Day of Action. You're part of this community and your voice is important. I hope you'll speak up and speak out. Together, we stand.
Imagine if education was not only limited to one type of learning. Imagine if neurodiverse students were treated fairly by the school system. My life would completely change. No longer forced to work until my eyes sting, until I hear ringing in my ears, until I can no longer see the people beside me, helping me stand up. My mother by my side at every panic attack. My father expanding my mind in a way that school never does. Not his fault that the dyslexia passed through his genes. Everyone around me making me feel like I have a disease that can be fixed, overcome. Different, not perceived to be good, a brain that thinks in a different way. But this is not bad. It does not make me stupid, even if I have been told that it does. Even if I have been told that I am never going to surpass failure. My newly found strengths, hiding my dyslexia in the dark. But it's still there. I still cry after 2 hours of staring at a math problem that I do not understand. I'm still scared to make mistakes, the red pen of corrections forever trapped in my mind, terrified of failure, overworking so that it never gets close. I am smart and hardworking, incredibly intelligent, but I have dyslexia, something most adults don't understand, something most adults don't care to learn about. Continuously teaching, but never heard, for I am a child and they are adults. They are right and I am wrong. Imagine if my sisters do not have to go through what I did. Imagine how their lives would change if their teachers believed in them, challenged them in a way that they love. My sister Sarah, a future robotics engineer. Angelina, who has an enormous imagination. Isabel, a wonderful storyteller. But these things are forgotten, hidden by their inability to read like their classmates. But why is intelligence based on how well you can read? Why should students be held back, diminished, because their brains are not ready for a certain subject? The school system, hundreds of years old, made to form factory workers. But we do no longer live in a time of factories. Future jobs have evolved, but the way we learn has stayed the same. Our imaginations forgotten, neglected. Brains not stimulated enough, forced to become average, not pushing the boundaries that are there to be broken. And when someone does break through, when a child with a different way of thinking has an idea, they are broken down, forgotten in the cracks of the school system. Imagine if education was not only limited to one type of learning, how things would be different, how the world would change.
I'm Emily, I have dyslexia and ADHD, and I'm from Massachusetts. If we stand together, the future for everyone is brighter. School will be a place where everyone is celebrated for their own unique learning methods. We won't be labeled as disabled because school will value all strengths equally. We will no longer feel shame for our reading or spelling abilities because we will be categorized for our strengths in big picture thinking and outside the box problem solving. We will be recognized for our innovative, creative, and analytical brains, not our disabled brains. Education is culturally accepted as a race to the finish line, and for us, the route of the race restricts us from using our preferred modes of transportation. As a result, we muster through, persevering to simply make it. But if we stand together, this perception can change. Some might offer an alternative mode of transportation, an accommodation, that works for the race, but we must first take precious time to figure out how it works. Some will say it's just not our race, and that all races must have losers. But what's the prize to this race? Education has not evolved from the Industrial Revolution. While the amendments that have been made are substantial improvements from before, they still strengthen what we can't easily step back and see, the foundation. The foundation is supporting a competition with strict regulations and barriers, so the faster and more efficient individuals can reach the American dream. So again, I ask, what's the prize? More accommodations for this race are not the solution. Our future is an education system that is not a race at all. If we stand together, following curiosity and building on creativity will be our future, letting us use our preferred modes of transportation and not restricting us to specific route is the best way to prepare us for our own paths of success, as we will all have equity in requiring more knowledge. Letting us all learn in ways that work for us is the goal. Our next step needs to be discovering a means of assessment, for lack of a better word, that supports this same goal. It is hypocritical to support universal design learning and then use a Scantron to measure and compare growth and success. Maya Angelou once said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." And it's time we do better. Thank you.
I was 7 years old when I was labeled a lost cause. In early elementary school, I was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. Upon hearing of my diagnosis, the school responded by saying that I would never go to college, I might graduate high school, and advised my parents to lower any expectations they had for me in life. Standing here today as a 21-year-old PhD student, I think we can agree that their predictions were incorrect. But at the time, this was devastating. Not the fact that I was dyslexic, the fact that the world had given up on me before I was even given a chance to prove myself. But it's true. Students with with learning disabilities are at an increased risk of dropping out of high school or college, becoming unemployed, or even incarcerated. This is not due to some internal flaw within these students, but instead due to the fact that these students are not receiving the supports they need in order to reach success. I believe in and am fighting for a better future for students with learning and attention issues, one in which they are given the supports that they need in order to reach their fullest potential. And I'm advocating for more than just better academic supports. We need to fundamentally change the way that we view learning disabilities. Whenever people hear my story and the fact that I'm dyslexic, I'm often met with statements along the lines of, "Wow, that's so impressive that you were able to overcome your dyslexia and become such a successful person." But this misses the whole picture. Dyslexia is a neurological difference in the very way my brain is wired and thus interprets the world. I did not overcome my dyslexia. Overcoming dyslexia was not the goal. I'm just as dyslexic today as I was the day I was born. I don't know who Rochelle Johnson is without dyslexia, as dyslexia is integrated into every day of my life and the very wiring of my brain. Learning disabled individuals walk through life in a uniquely learning disabled way. I see a future where a diagnosis of learning disabilities is not met with feelings of pity or loss like mine and so many others were, but instead seen as an opportunity to better understand the learning disabled individual and celebration of neurodiversity. So let us all stand together in celebration of neurodiversity and fight for a future where every student with learning and attention issues is both seen as capable of great things and given all the supports that they need in order to achieve it.
If we stand together, learning disabilities are identified early and accurately. Students with learning disabilities are not assumed to be lazy. Race, ethnicity, languages, and economic status do not play a role in the under or over identification of students with learning disabilities. Teachers receive comprehensive training and evidence-based instructional techniques and interventions for students with learning disabilities. Learning disabilities are universally understood so that all individuals are accepted, supported, and empowered to live a self-determined life.
Hey everybody, it's Chef George Duran from Food Network and TLC's Ultimate Cake Off. I am happy to be standing together with the LD community here. This is truly dear to my heart. I, as a young person growing up in South America, grew up with some learning disabilities myself. But the biggest problem was that I didn't know this, and most of the time what happened throughout my youth was that everybody asked me, "What is wrong with you? Why are you having so many difficulties at school?" And this in turn translated for me getting some help. But not a lot of people at my age back in the 70s had this kind of help. And my goal for the future, if we stand together, is to find more diagnostic tools, or at least tools that are reachable, that are more accessible for the youth, so that young people, as they're growing up and they are having difficulty with any sort of learning disabilities, they're able to get this help immediately, or that adults that are with them, the teachers, the parents, can immediately spot it and say, all right, there is a way to test for this. There is an easy way to figure out what the problem may be and to find solutions for it. Because once we can diagnose and find out what these problems are as a young child, I have no doubt in my mind that for the future we'd be able to solve all these problems and allow a lot of young people to have a normal future, well, just like I have myself. So I'm standing together here again with NCLD and very happy to say that the future looks bright, guys. I'm hopeful, and I know that we will find a lot of these tools accessible for our future children and beyond.
What's up, y'all? It's Garrett Bowles here with the Denver Broncos. If we stand together, our future will look like a world where we can listen to each other, that allows us to better understand each other. A world where we can go above and beyond to provide resources to those that are in need. A world filled with compassion and unconditional love. A world that allows us with learning disabilities to shine. It's my hope that we can all stand together to make our future better.
Hi, my name is Julia, and I stand with NCLD because NCLD has allowed me to become my best self in the workplace. And I hope on this LD Day of Action, you can become your best self.
Hi, my name is Susan Reynolds, and I'm the field organizer for the National Center for Learning Disabilities. I am a learning disabled adult and identify as ADHD. I'm raising a child with a learning disability and ADHD, and my husband is a disabled veteran. So as you can tell, everyone in my home identifies as a person with a disability. We are heavily invested in our community, the disability community. As a child, I faced educational discrimination. I was denied an IEP or an individual education plan and a 504 plan. I had too many high school teachers say things like, "Kids like me don't take the AP exams," and other pretty awful things. In the workplace, I faced discrimination and had to fight against stereotypes that both harm and hurt my community, the disability community. When asked what does the future look like for people with learning disabilities and attention issues, it's a future where the disability community, which includes those of us with learning disabilities and attention issues, have independence, we have freedom, we have control over our own lives. And as President George H.W. Bush said so beautifully on the day that the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed, it is a future where we have the opportunity to blend fully and equally into the rich mosaic of the American mainstream. Our future is a part of the greater disability community, and we can only achieve a future of independence and more when we recognize that. So don't be ashamed to say that you are disabled. I spent too many years hiding behind that shame. It took me too many years to be proud that I am a part of the disability community. So advocate for acceptance, understanding, and for your civil rights. Make trouble, because the discrimination I face in the education system and in other jobs, and more discrimination than anyone should ever have to endure, it needs to end. And we, together with our allies, can make a difference.
The story starts in elementary school. I very quickly learned I was different, for I was told it every day. I would be the last one done with the packet, the first to start chewing on his pencil, and the very first one to get his foot moving 1,000 miles an hour. So, like any deficient kid, I was labeled. But surprisingly enough, even the labels, they couldn't help me. So one day, my teachers decided to bring my parents and I together. They sat us down and they said right in front of our faces that your son is incapable of learning and that he is stupid. You see, humans compensate and humans evolve. That is exactly what we have achieved during COVID-19, and that is precisely what I decided to do. You see, I was somewhere down here, and right there, well, that is the gold standard for me. Normal. So I thought to myself at a very young age, now how the heck am I gonna get up there? Well, I started to compensate. I was an award-winning swimmer. I taught myself how to play piano. I'm an award-winning artist. And you know, it didn't stop there. After that, I taught myself the stock market. I learned technical analysis. I invested in Bitcoin. I had my first 4-figure passive income month before I'm even an adult. But all of that was deprived of me. The idea, the purpose, the future that I would not take part in because I was just too stupid. And that same exact idea, purpose, and future is deprived of so many at such a young age.
Hey, it's Meredith O'Connor, and I love this question because to me, a future that is rid of ableism would not just necessarily include and accept people with disabilities or who learn differently, but it would encourage and look for those people, because I think having different aspects of intelligence and having different areas where you're strong really can provide a wonderful service to society. By forcing, a square into a round peg, it's not going to go as well as fostering somebody's strengths. And when you foster someone's strengths, I think it can really lead to some wonderful discoveries in life. My favorite quote is by Albert Einstein, and I might not be getting this right, but if you try to teach, everybody is a genius, but if you try to teach a fish to fly, it will spend its whole life thinking it's stupid. And to me, in my experience, I remember thinking that because I learned differently, I internalized it and thought it was like, I'm not as good, I'm not as smart, when really I do excel in certain areas, but it's just in different ways, and I need, have different learning needs. So I think that had if the system can truly embrace, and by system I mean educators and friends and peers, if we can all truly embrace each other's differences, I think that will allow for people to truly realize who they are and fulfill their potential.
My name is Clarice Jeppsen, and I am the state founder and president of Decoding Dyslexia, Nebraska. I am also the founder of a nonprofit organization here locally called Voice Advocacy Center, where we help students, children, and adults who struggle to read, write, and spell due to dyslexia and other reading-related disorders. I definitely feel like this is the time that we must all understand how significant equity is, and that we provide and that we demand equitable access to services for those in the LD community. I am also the state president of the Learning Disabilities Association of Nebraska. And one of the things that has systemically and undeniably been a huge problem within the LD community at large is the disproportionality that exists between races. I want to see a learning disability community that not only states in name, but in purpose, in services, in access and importance, equity for all, inclusion for all. So that's what I would like to see. How do we make that happen? We have to admit that it is not happening. And we have to all be very conscious and accountable to each other and to this population to do better and to be better. So that's what I think needs to happen. Again, my name is Clarice Jeppsen, and I represent the community in Omaha, Nebraska, and the nation.
Hi, my name is Atira Robertson, and I get the opportunity to serve on NCLD's Young Adult Leadership Council. So when I think about the future of this movement and of this community, where we're going, where we've gone, I see a future where we, specifically Black students, do not have to fight as hard for necessary accommodations and tools as we do now, so we can succeed in our daily lives, because that is something that has been happening. I know I have struggled throughout the years, throughout my education, to get the assistance that I need to succeed. And had I not, had a mom who was willing to go to bat for me as hard as she did, which is not something that should be really necessary when you think about it, I would have fell through the cracks. But the more we progress, the more we have these conversations and make it known that we need a seat at the table, they're seeing, okay, wow, let's address this, let's acknowledge this, and more importantly, let's do something about it, because we're not going anywhere, and we're gonna keep coming. We are gonna keep coming because every voice deserves to be heard. Every single voice.
My name is Carolyn Jeppsen, and I have the pleasure of serving as the CEO, president, and co-founder of Broad Futures. Broad Futures is a training, mentoring, and paid internship program for young people with learning disabilities. And when I think about the future of the LD movement, if we all stand together, I see a world where we are looking at folks with LD holistically, where educators, students, medical professionals, children, young adults, parents, and allies are all coming together to meet the needs of our community. I see a community that embraces diversity in all aspects of that word. But most importantly, I see a world where the workplace is inviting folks with LD to be a part of it, where there is no longer stigma around disclosing your disability in the workplace, and where employers see young people with learning disabilities as an asset to the growing workforce. They see folks with LD as a source of inspiration and innovation in the workplace, and where inclusion and universal design are as prevalent in the workplace as they are in our educational systems. That's the world I see of the future of LD if we all stand together. I also firmly believe that if we stand together, we can move forward faster.
Hi, I'm Sandy Holman, Director of the Culture Co-op and United in Unity. What does it mean if people with disabilities and attention issues stand together for our futures? It means tremendous impact and change. I know that if we stand together, we can change practices, we can change policies, we can address historical, cultural constructs which have traditionally kept our community from reaching its fullest potential. And we've done it despite those things. So I know if we stand together, we are game changers. We will let our voices be heard. We will have interventions that have impact, and we will demand with love to stand up and be counted so we can be the full human beings that we already are, who have much to offer this country and our world. I believe this with all my heart. It's an honor to stand with my community in solidarity, working together across lines, intersecting different factors that also affect us, like race and gender, and make a difference. I'm looking forward to working with everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this year's Together We Stand Town Hall. And thank you to the National Center for Learning Disabilities for putting together this event and all of your efforts to advocate for the 1 in 5 people with learning and attention issues. For more than 40 years, NCLD has worked tirelessly on behalf of those with learning disabilities to allow every individual to have the academic, social, and emotional skills needed to succeed in school, to succeed at work, to succeed in life. The millions of you out there with dyslexia, like me, know how critical these efforts are. We need to keep up the fight for effective resources in schools, wraparound support for families, and to build a more inclusive community. As a member of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, I am proud to work closely on these issues with our committee members. We're currently in the process of appropriating funds for the FY 2022 budget, which I believe will be critical investments to help those with learning disabilities. The President's budget request addresses long-standing inequities in our nation's education system by making important investments in universal early childhood programs, free community college, and addressing teacher shortages. The Appropriations Committee is also considering key investments that will increase funding for the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which is crucial for students with disabilities. These investments to address chronic inequities in schools are critically important, especially now as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have more work to do when it comes to cutting-edge research that can help us understand more about learning disabilities. Brain scans and other tools can help researchers measure the neurological impact that instructional interventions have on children who learn differently, including those with dyslexia, ADHD, as well as other issues. I'm proud to be supporting an increase in funding for the NIH, which supports critical research on learning disabilities at the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, NICHD. We are making great progress, but know that we have a long way to go until every person with a learning disability has what they need to succeed. Take it from me, I personally know what it's like. I remember as if it was yesterday being pulled out of class in 3rd grade because I had to go to speech class. I didn't pronounce my consonants properly. I had to repeat 7th grade because my dyslexia made everyone think I was so lazy. I remember the relief I felt when I finally was brought up to speed that my slow reading wasn't a function of my attitude or my effort in reading. It was really a function of just the way I learned. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me. And that process allows me to really appreciate what so many kids go through as they have to address issues like dyslexia. I mean, dyslexia in the end doesn't have to be a condemnation, something that you have to work against. For many of us, as we learn to navigate within the world of dyslexia, it helps us utilize other skills. For me, it made me figure out how to get along better with other people. dyslexics work in all different ways, but again and again, you see dyslexics who have achieved great things. My fellow Senator Michael Bennett is a dyslexic as well, and had to repeat a grade in school. And look where he is. He's my senior U.S. Senator from Colorado. Anyway, thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak with you and for your tireless advocacy in pursuit of this cause. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you to NCLD and all of the organizations who have helped put this event together. Especially want to say a thank you to our young advocates here with us tonight. Your bravery inspires me every day. My name is Marcus Sutra. I'm the president of Eye to Eye, and I'm a person with a learning disability. And as a person with a learning difference, I know how isolating that experience often can be. Our disabilities are invisible, which can make it almost impossible to find a community. Events like today that bring together the intelligence, the power, and the beauty of this community are a sign of the progress that this movement has made. Students are leading this work now, and people are noticing, but there's also so much work to be done. If we are going to have a more equitable education system, we must ensure that people on the margins are at the forefront of this movement, and that students have a voice, and not just a voice, but are seen, heard, and valued. To ensure full inclusion, we must recognize the intersectionality of the LD community and celebrate the diversity that exists in this lived experience. LD students are in every community. From every background, they live in every state, sit on both sides of the political aisle, and their LD is an aspect of who they are, but not the whole. We need to use research-based interventions, both academic and social emotional, to fully support the development of the whole child. For us to fully address the needs of this community, we must ensure that we have the funding to get students the identification and supports that they deserve. Though I struggled greatly in the public school system, it was filled with stigma, misunderstanding, I lacked role models and the community that I really needed to flourish. I personally know what it's like to receive the privilege of being identified. I was given the luxury of knowing that I had dyslexia, of knowing that I had ADHD. A diagnosis that afforded me the knowledge and opportunities which directly led to me being here with you all today. But so many students and families go through school not knowing why they struggle and not knowing what supports that they need to succeed. This is a civil rights movement, and a quality education cannot be a luxury anymore. My call to action to you all tonight is to continue to grow this movement, to build on the progress that we've already made. We need LD people and we need our allies. We need to create more accomplices in this work. Every time you tell your story, whether it's online, to friends, to educators, to policymakers, you create an opportunity to build this movement, to showcase the intelligence, the power, and the beauty that is this community. We are a community that's full of so much potential. We just need to continue to show the world that. Now, what I'm asking of you tonight will require a lot of bravery, but I know that if we stand together as one, we will succeed. Thank you all so much for all you do and all your bravery each day. And now I want to hand things off to one of my LD brothers and leaders and one of my best friends in the whole world, David Flank.
Thank you, Marcus. Oh, great to be with you. Great to be with this entire community. I want to ask everyone to take a minute and to pause, something that we haven't had a chance to do that often. And I want you to think about who is in this space, in this moment, right now. Look back at the chat. Look at all the comments that people are making, thinking about a story that you heard tonight that moved you, thinking about your own story. I dare you not to have already been moved to create great change. And in fact, you've shown up here tonight, which means you are, as Marcus just suggested, quite brave. So as I wrap up this evening, I do have some thank yous. I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your stories in big and small ways. I want to thank everyone who shared their stories live. I want to thank Lindsay for kicking us off and challenging us to imagine a future that is different than the one we have been coming from. I would challenge us all to say that we aren't trying to get back to normal. Normal did not work so well before. We are trying to get somewhere better. So to wrap things up, I'm going to just end with two stories. The first is something that is small. I've been thinking a lot about what I did miss back in normal, right? What, especially around schools, did you miss? I ask you to think about that in the positive. You know, for me, it came down to something quite simple. It was actually desks. Desks in a room with other people. Because as hard as school was for me as someone with dyslexia and ADHD, getting to sit in a room with other people, some of whom, 1 in 5, who learned like I did, the 4 in 5 who didn't, that community mattered. There's a reason why we are striving to come back to that normal. So I want to tell you about my first desk. The desk I remember before I ever had identified as somebody with a learning difference. I had one of those small little school desks. I'm sure you can probably remember them. Maybe you're hopeful that your kids or you will go back to one of these desks. I had one of those desks that didn't open, but it was just a big hole in the middle. And you just, shoved as many things in as possible. And I think you won when it was full. Well, for me, one of the things that was actually an asset in that desk was the fact that I could put my hands in it. And as somebody who had ADHD, again, I didn't know I had ADHD, but moving my hands in that desk was an accommodation. Oftentimes people with ADHD, I think, succeed when we were able to do multiple things at the same time. So I could follow what was going on in the class. And in time, I started etching inside the desk. Well, one day I decided to look inside the desk to see how my etchings were going. And what I discovered were lots of other etchings in the desks. Surely students, maybe dyslexic or ADHD students, maybe other students who learn differently, or maybe not. Either way, students before me had decided to leave their mark in the desk. And when I looked inside that desk, I thought, I am not alone. I thought like an archaeologist might come along and look at this desk and say, oh, this is like the hidden republic of the people who learn differently. Of course, we didn't have to hide. We're right here. We are convening together virtually. So when I think about those desks, it made me feel hopeful. It made me feel hopeful that we can go back to something much better than those desks, because those desks are just an example of a place where we can go to learn. And what we learned in this pandemic is that people who learn differently, yes, we were challenged before the pandemic and we were challenged even harder during the pandemic, but we are resilient. And from our innovation, from our creativity, we can imagine a better future. And I think we heard that call to action so many different times tonight. So my second story is one about me moving on beyond the desks. As you may know, IDI, a proud partner of the National Center for Learning Disabilities, has been doing work side by side for many, many years. IDI began as a mentoring program where college and high school students who learn differently went into middle schools and mentored those students. What we quickly learned, and I was the first mentor, I will name that I'm 41 now, but this was 20 some odd years ago when I was the first mentor. I made a difference by just sharing my story. And what I invite you to do is to continue to share your story. But after I graduated, I quickly went from being the mentor to being the chaperone. And what I mean by that is young people across the country who were doing this kind of work started calling me and saying, oh my gosh, things are changing in politics and policy that it's affecting us. And we need to talk to our political officials so that they can hear our stories and make decisions based on our proximity to this experience. Proximity is something I hadn't thought a lot about. And in fact, if you think about proximity, that's just lived experience near a challenge. We scale some stories very well in our society. If you are a white man, Christian, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied, neurotypical person in school and in other places in our society, your story is heard loud and clear. And as those stories of diversity get more rich, oftentimes people like me as a white man need to understand we have to pause and share our power and in fact step back. And the irony is not lost on me that I am here sharing this wisdom to say, I, as somebody who's a white man, needs to take a step back. I have an LD story which unites us across our difference, but also it is a chance to take a step back. And that is why I have been listening tonight. And I use my point of privilege to be able to share and ignite a fire for millions to make a big difference. So my story is about the first time I understood that. Young people, again, across the country started calling me saying, we need to talk to our political officials. I said, what do you want me to say? And they said, no, no, no. We don't need you to say anything. You need to help us get the meeting. And so I called my friends at the National Center for Learning Disabilities and I said, how do we get this meetings? And they said, that's what we do, among many other things. And so together we brought young people, this is long time ago. So we piled folks in a bus and we went down to DC to have these young people say, this is what we need in our schools and in our society as people who learn differently. And I had the privilege of sitting in one of those meetings. I remember sitting back in the meeting, and one person, a guy named Jeremy, told his story. And I remember very clearly, showed up not fully sure of what to do when you meet with a political official. He had forgotten a tie, so he unbuttoned his shirt. He had forgotten his belt, so he untucked his pants to cover that situation. But he had a story that mattered. And I very much remember he was sitting in the senator's office and he said, I want you to know that as somebody who learns differently, I'm not trying to overcome my learning difference. I'm trying to be celebrated for it. A sentiment we heard tonight, right? Another student spoke, expressing a very similar thing, talking about the power of accommodations and how that was a great equalizer. It was the first time I started thinking about this as a civil rights movement, equity movement. Our final student was talking about the power of teachers. And I just want to pause, and for any teachers on the line tonight, just celebrate you. So much of what we do is have young people's stories be shining, and then we as adults have to listen. And teachers, you all have done that best, and you've done it during this pandemic. So thank you for that, and parents as well. So at the end of this, I thought, oh, this is incredible. We have these young people with diverse stories, but the through line being LD, talking to our politicians and saying, quite frankly, you don't understand me, but I'm here to tell you my story. What I didn't know is in that meeting, it was with Senator Bennett. And as you heard tonight, Senator Bennett was one of ours. He is a proud dyslexic. And what he said in that moment was, you aren't telling me something I don't know. It is part of my lived story, and I'm happy to share it. What was fun in that moment is he turned to his chief of staff who had set up the entire meeting. He said, Jonathan, isn't this great? As though Jonathan did not know the story. And Jonathan turned to him and said, yeah, I know, I'm dyslexic too. Something that neither of them had ever spoken about. I always imagined that memos had been sent to each other and neither was ever reading them. Anyhow, this change happened with their relationship and ultimately the way in which political officials were seeing our young people, because our young people were the ones telling the story. And that is my call to you tonight. Find your story, figure out a way to tell it, and find your allies, find your community, and keep marching on. This has been an absolutely incredible evening. I hope you feel as fired up as I do. I know I'm going to take this energy, put it in my tank, and tomorrow go back to work. This is going to take some bravery, but there's an opportunity here. We are reemerging in a way that we can pay for all the challenge by doing good in the days and weeks and years ahead. So thank you everyone for organizing, for gifting us your time tonight to listen, to share, to put thoughts in the chat. And most importantly, I hope you've written something down to say, tomorrow I'm going to do something different. I have the great privilege of turning this over to my friend Joey. He leads the National Center for Learning Disabilities Young Adult Initiatives. Thank you, Joy, for organizing this. Thank you for having me a part of this. And with that, I'll hand it over to you to give us some final calls to action. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, David. Hi, everyone. I have had the privilege of viewing and listening to and reading all of the amazing visions that were submitted for this event tonight. And what I am here to do is ask you to take all that energy and positivity and think about the future. And I have one final call to action for you. I'm going to share this on the screen. If you want to, take this energy and go forth in the future, I am giving you one final call to action right here. If you go to this, there we go, this website, ncld.co/buildourfuture, there are some practical steps that you can take tonight to build a future for our LD community that represents all of the amazing visions and values that were expressed here tonight. And I want to say that this is iterative. We're learning, we're listening, we're taking everything in, we're building an inclusive community and movement together. And so continue to take these leaps of faith with us, add your voice, let your members of Congress know that they have a role that they can play in building this future together. with that, we are done for the evening. I'm happy to add any, to take any questions or chats in the Q&A section. I just want to thank every single person who contributed to tonight. We received over 60 responses from our community, and those are still coming in. So thank you to everyone who participated, who joined in the chat, who shared a video. Your voices are so important, and together we can make an inclusive, intersectional, and just LD community and movement. Thanks. Have a good night.